you doing? We're joined by Stone Dead John today, and I'd just like you to first introduce yourselves.
My name's Christopher, CJ, and I am the vocalist and guitarist, rhythm guitarist. Well, we change about, but
Change about, yeah.
Yeah, from Stone Dead John.
I'm Shug, lead guitar and rhythm guitar.
Excellent, boys, excellent. I've been really looking forward to having you on. It's the first interview I've done myself, so I'm dead excited. But firstly, how are you guys doing? Live music's came to a standstill now for a good period of time. Has this gave you maybe a creative freedom? Do you feel it in some ways, or has it stifled it?
I think kind of just during the general lockdown that we've had, we found a little bit of motivation, so to speak, when it came to writing new material. So we because we had kind of ample time and things had wound down, that's where this project was kind of essentially born from, was from lockdown. So we played one show.
One show.
Prior to lockdown, and everything shut down for us. So it really kind of has spurred us on. If anything, it kind of gave us a little kick up the arse, so to speak, to get out and start writing.
And I think that's the thing as well, with kind of being a creative person, is that we're kind of in unseen territory, and we don't realise how much this stuff actually is going to affect us, you know?
Mm-hmm. I think it's quite weird, man, because like, before all this stuff we were prolific writers anyway. We'd churn out songs left, right and centre every week, but see, actually just not doing it and going up to each other's house every day of the week and writing some of the songs that have been flowing at us.
Yeah.
We must have about 2 or 3 albums worth of material now.
Yeah.
Would you say you take a fair share of the songwriting process between you?
We write everything together, 50-50. There's kind of very seldomly where I'll be at home working on something, or Sean will be at home working on something. And that's not to say that we don't write individually as well, but our process tends to come from like kind of an improv kind of angle. I'll tend to ad-lib everything, so Sean will either start playing a riff or a nice chord progression, or vice versa. I'll be the one to start playing it, and then we'll just kind of we'll kind of vibe off each other and bounce off each other with ideas and just kind of feel the song out, and kind of from that, if it's major, minor, happy, sad, like I kind of tend to try and write to how I'm feeling in that moment, and I think Sean's pretty much the same. You can kind of, and then I'll start ad-libbing vocals, and then from that we'll kind of get a feel of, okay, what is this song about? What's the story? What are we trying to portray here? And then from that, yeah, it's kind of, I'll go away, and after we've written the initial body of the song, I'll go and add lyrics to it. But that kind of is our process. It's very much.
It's a chemistry thing, I think. When
Yeah.
you come up with something, I can hear what he's thinking when I'm trying to write, or when I write something,
Yeah.
I just can hear the exact part that I want.
And do you feel as if that's evolved there over the years?
I think so, yeah. I mean, there's that thing amongst musicians where there's that musicians telepathy type thing. Do you know what I mean? Where you're both in that moment of writing something, and the kind of the whole technical process. Do you know what I mean? The language of music kind of evolves from that, and you're just there, and it's you're in that moment, and there's no theory. There's nothing. You're playing, and you're feeding off each other. And again, I think our preference is to write that way, because you kind of do tend to encapsulate the most natural sound that way. Like, especially for us, like everything we tend to do is like, it does vary, but most of the time it's quite moody and emotional, and that's something that we've always had in us. I mean, we're great fans of causing a ruckus and a good old-fashioned rock and roll, but yeah, I think just the kind of the atmospheric stuff, just kind of a lot of that kind of just comes really naturally to us, and just it kind of just falls out of the sky.
That is something that's evolved over the years, because some of these songs are songs that, like, from what, 5-6 years ago?
Yeah, a lot of the material is very old.
So these new songs that we're kind of going into with, like Old Jimmy and Stratosphere and stuff like that, with the moody kind of aspect to it, that is like an example of our writing evolving in it.
Yeah, absolutely. We kind of started off doing the kind of good old-fashioned rock and roll stuff and blues stuff, and that still is very much a massive element of who we are, and our kind of our roots and our kind of. But I mean, yeah, from such a varied background of playing. We've played in multiple bands. I mean, he's played in math rock bands, and I've played in kind of indie, and my roots were actually pop. Like I started off in a two-piece kind of acoustic pop duo type thing. So it was we've evolved a lot since the kind of the start of our kind of songwriting careers. But I mean, that got to be when I was like 13, 14, I think. I penned one of the first songs I ever wrote. It was Youth Club. Youth Club was one of the first things I ever wrote. But yeah, it's evolved massively, and we kind of really just came into our own. And me and Sean, we've been writing together for years, and we're best friends, so that always helps as well. We've got a kind of deep connection with each other, man. We're close, so yeah, it goes beyond just the music. Really.
Right, definitely, that's amazing. See, you guys are based from Glasgow, but the blues and rock tracks you've produced stylistically, and I know you've heard this a lot, sounds quite similar to Black Stone Cherry.
Yeah.
What influences would you say have had an impact on your music?
See that blues, like the blues and blues rock thing. I think that comes from Chris.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you hear in the tracks where there's like kind of bass heavy stuff and riffs and distortion and all that is Chris to a T. I think when you get the more somber tracks and stuff, that's where I come into my element. And when these new songs when we're combining them, Little Jimmy's a perfect example where we're combining that.
Yeah.
That blues rock feel.
Those varying styles.
The somber style that I bring to it, and it's like a new sound, man. I like it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the influences for me. I think if we were to start rhyming off influences, it's definitely bands like the White Stripes and the Black Keys. I mean, duos, like we love duos. We love Royal Blood as well, and bands like Kaleo and Fiddler. And if we're talking about older stuff, I mean, I'm heavily influenced by like Johnny Cash and Buddy Holly and like old school rockabilly stuff. So you can hear Nirvana. We often get compared to grunge bands as well. Alice in Chains, Pearl Jam gets mentioned and flung about quite a lot. So, I mean, even although we're not like huge fans of these bands, I think people often hear like a husky voice, and they often mistake that for sounding like, oh, you sound like the Foo Fighters, or oh, you sound like Nirvana, just because there's a bit of a growl in my vocals. But I mean, it's something that's strange. It's something that really just kind of came naturally to us. It was just that this is the way that we write. It wasn't like we were trying to copy anything or we were trying to emulate these bands. Although your influences do have a profound effect on how your material sounds, we don't like to be restricted by genre either. We love doing the shoegazy stuff and the more atmospheric and melodic music, as well as we love a good old fashioned rock and roll, blues, dirty number. But it's like, yeah, we don't like to restrict ourselves in that sense. But I agree with what Sean's saying as well. I think when you hear the down and dirty blues stuff, that's all me. And anytime anything atmospheric or melodic, that's definitely Sean's influence on that, and kind of that just leads me. And as we said before, we kind of just feed off each other, and yeah, it's all very natural the way we kind of write.
No, definitely, I agree with you. And on that point, something that I've noticed as well with your music is it does take a lot of inspiration for music overseas.
Yep.
But I've noticed that a familiarity as well to like the writing in particular, and it feels very familiar. Do you feel as if having that creative freedom of being from like a place like Scotland and taking inspiration from overseas has made you look at music differently?
I mean, it's a really good question. Yeah, it does. It definitely molds. It definitely kind of molds. It molded my taste anyway. I mean, I grew up with that kind of 90s grunge music. So, I mean, I was a fan of Nirvana. I was a big fan of like nu metal bands like Slipknot and Limp Bizkit, but at the same time as well, I also loved things that were very melodic and shoegazy as well. Like I love bands like Radiohead, like that lo-fi drenched in reverb sound. So it was all of that era when I was listening to it. It was a very it was very different back in the kind of the 90s and the early 90s. You had a lot of bands coming through the main. I mean, obviously pop punk was a huge influence for loads of 90s kids. Like we listened to bands like Green Day and Blink-182 Foo Fighters and stuff like that as well. So yeah, I mean, I definitely think the overseas and that kind of that American rock movement, the new metal stuff, the pop punk stuff, all of that had a massive influence on us. But then as you kind of develop and get older, it's like you start discovering things like Jimi Hendrix, and you start digging a bit deeper and started listening to The Doors and Pink Floyd and Fleetwood Mac and a lot of the kind of classic and a lot of that old classic ambient rock that you hear, man. And it's had a profound effect on us. But I mean, I think as well, as although we take influence from that, it's definitely we definitely have our own thing that we do. It's but yeah, I would definitely say we take influence from all that overseas music.
If it is taking influence, I don't think we actively do it though when we're writing. I think when we write, it just kind of falls out naturally rather than let's try and write like a Jimi
absolutely
Hendrix song or whatever it is. I think if we have these influences that are coming out in the music and these people are hearing that, then it is coming naturally.
Yeah, you're hearing a natural evolution from when we were, obviously, from what we were exposed to as kids and teenagers. I remember when Limp Bizkit did the Rollin' tune, like my dad's got this clip of me as a wee guy, keep rolling, rolling, rolling. So, I mean, yeah, all that stuff, of course, it's been a massive influence on us. And yeah, I mean, Kings of Leon's a big one as well. We're Kings of Leon fans. So, again, you've got it makes you kind of think. Do you kind of are you just this mix mash of just different genres? And I mean that is essentially what it is, but it's not intentional. I think is what we're trying to say. It's not intentional that we sound so similar, but yeah, you can definitely hear that all these influences in our music. I would agree with that.
What I like as well about yourselves is that with a new track that you've released, Old Jimmy, it's ripped up a lot of previous themes for what you would expect for Stone Dead John.
Yeah.
And what was the influence behind that, and what was you listening to before that track came to be?
Nothing. We'd really been writing a lot. As Sean kind of touched on previously, was like we'd really been playing with songs that we've not released yet. So a lot of the stuff that's been out previously was stuff that was recorded with previous projects with myself and Sean, and some of the tracks that were released were like B-sides, and they'd never seen the light of day, and they were recorded with other bands. So we'd kind of reimagined these songs and wanted to make them our own. As we said, this was more so a project of we didn't want to be held by limitations. We felt like every other band that we had been in previously, there were restrictions, and we weren't really given that rope, so to speak, because you're around other egos, and everybody wants to be the lead guitarist, and everybody wants to be the vocalist, and everybody wants to push and pull things in a different way. So I really think it was more a kind of a growing up aspect. We'd kind of been involved in different bands, and we'd played the Scottish scene so regularly, and we kind of came away from all that, and I was doing my own thing, and Sean was doing his own thing, and that's what kind of got us kind of to back in a room together to start writing together. Was that we were like, man, like fuck this, let's not be defined by any one genre in particular. Let's just release and record and do everything that we want to do as it comes to us naturally. We don't want to have a set theme. We just want to write music. We just want to write music that we like. And yeah, it's like Old Jimmy, it came from a really deep emotional place. And yeah, it's definitely influenced by a lot of the things that people are talking about, but it's definitely a more our own sound. I think that sound that you hear with Old Jimmy, and that sound that you hear with Stratosphere and All For You, and the stuff that's a little bit more downbeat and kind of lo-fi and acoustic, that comes from just me and Sean just playing together.
That's an evolution of the sound we've got now, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because those old tracks like Youth Club and No Fear and Renegades, like they were from different bands.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe it was a band that Chris was in himself, and St Providence was a band that me and Chris were in, that we released those kind of songs. But like we've released those songs, and you can see the progression over the years of those songs. What's coming out now, like Old Jimmy, these are new songs that we're writing currently.
We're writing currently, yeah. So you're hearing previous works, essentially, the stuff that I had written years ago, and now you're hearing stuff that we're doing currently. So what you've heard is from those older songs like Youth Club and No Fear, as Sean just said, it's a natural progression from what we were doing then in comparison to what we're doing now. Old Jimmy is something that we wrote very recently, and we fell in love with it as well when we heard it. And again, it being so deeply emotional. I told you the story, Daryl, before we started before we started the interview. I was telling him about when we were in the studio and we had the open live session recording it, and we were arguing about who wrote that little plinky, the hook, and it was like. And it was like I wrote it, and then Sean's like, I fucking wrote it. So then obviously it came to that point of we got the open live recording through, and it was Sean that wrote it. Obviously, he's the melody man. But that was a kind of prime example of what we were talking about with that bouncing off each other. Like we were both so adamant that each of us had wrote that hook.
Plus it sounds like a part that either of us could write.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but yeah, I mean, all the lyrics and stuff, the lyrics were wrote like in one take. We were in the studio, we started playing it, and everything that you hear that's recorded now is almost identical to the way that I initially sang it. So it really was one of those moments that fell right off the tongue and was ad-libbed. And yeah, that finished product that you hear with the track was the way that it came out. We need to dig out that old the pirate recording of us actually writing it. We'll maybe release that as like a little B-side or something additional. But yeah.
That's fantastic. So see how a song like Old Jimmy, is that something that you want to explore more and having that emotional kind of sentiment in the songwriting?
Well, I mean, we've always done it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've I mean, if you go back and if you were Stratosphere was the first track we released, and if you go back and listen to that's a song that's again very old. It's like two or 3 years old now.
Out of the old songs, Strat is the newest of the old, wasn't it? So you could see that even at that point, before we had stopped playing together and releasing, that we were about to go in that direction.
Yeah, we've always done it, and there are songs that again we've not released. We're currently working on an album. So we can disclose that. We're working on an album. We're working on a few things, a couple of different EPs. We've got a few releases penned. So we've just had so much to write about. We've been on a bit of a spree, and we've had feedback from other people and management and stuff saying like, oh, you shouldn't be releasing as much as you're releasing. But it was like, well, we really wanted to let all the previous works breathe. That's what the initial kind of project was let's everything that we've not released, all the B-sides, let's give them a home. Let's give all this great music that we've wrote throughout the years a place to breathe, and a place where we can see how people react to it and if people are digging the stuff that we're writing currently. So we just kind of released everything that was previously written and recorded that hadn't really seen the light of day. We gave it that a home, and then from that obviously we're doing the stuff that we're doing currently. So yeah, as we said, that natural evolution that you're hearing is just from where we were at to where we are now. And yeah, we've never really changed. We've always wrote very moody, very atmospheric tunes. Like it's again, we've got a whole host of them that again they're recorded and they're produced now. They're sitting there. They're penned for release, so they're done. They're pending release right now. So you're going to hear a lot more of this sound that you're hearing currently with Old Jimmy. That's definitely something that's been in the making and has been recorded for
I think we need
years.
to stick with this sound, man. Like if we can judge all the songs, then All For You and Old Jimmy are.
In Stratosphere as well. Yeah, everything follows a pattern where it's very much this kind of shoegazy kind of melodic rock stuff that we've always done, because we're two guitarists, so it comes out that way. Like, I mean, even although Sean will play synths and I play a little bit of drums and bass and stuff, and everything that you hear on the polished tracks is all us. So there's bass and there's shakers and there's percussion and there's everything on those tracks. But it's us playing it. But I mean, we're guitarists first and foremost, so they are very much melody-driven tracks. Yeah, it's always been something that we've done.
Honestly, I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys come out with next. So thank you so much for coming on, guys, and it's been a pleasure.
No worries, man. Thank you. Thanks for having us.